Ryan, can you turn up my volume a little bit louder? All right, if everybody could come in and have a seat. Not quite sure what happened with the pizza. Is it? All right, so what we're going to do is start the meeting, and then when pizza gets here, we'll try to keep it from being too much of a distraction, but use of everybody's time, let's get this started as quickly as possible. So I'm going to run outside and ask for everybody to come in again, but I would like to start at 12, which is kind of now, 2 minutes. So, yes. Perfect, thank you. Thank you. People are not migrating. So whether or not people are sitting down, I'm just going to start. Yeah. Because otherwise we'll never start. Okay. In order to get this meeting started, let's just go. It's 12 o'clock. Want to be respectful of everybody's time. And hopefully the people outside will come in quickly as they see we're going through the agenda. I am Mark Foote, the VUU board president, and I will be facilitating the meeting today. Ryan, can we get the next slide? Okay, so we have a relatively short agenda. We want to leave time to complete the interest fair, which is the last item, and also hopefully you've already taken a second to see that we have tables outside. But first, we're going to get an update on the VUU campus mortgage from Deanne McClenahan. Then the board would like to talk about the principles and sources bylaws again. We talked about it briefly last month at the Congregational meeting, and want to tell you more about that. Then Congregational survey, we have a presentation on that, and that is pretty much it. Now pizza is still getting set up, so when it's ready, we'll try to keep it from being too much of a distraction, but let's try to get everybody out of here as quickly as possible. So Deanne, are you here? She was here. All right, if somebody could grab Deanne, I know she had, yep, okay, perfect. Deanne is on her way. Actually, so while Deanne is moving on, Ryan, can you do the next slide? No, the one after that, and we're gonna double back. Okay, bylaws amendment. Now, the Board of Trustees took the recommendation of our special committee to replace the initial language that we proposed. Ryan, can you go to the next slide? The initial language that we presented over the summer during our congregational meeting, there were some concerns about a modification that we made. Dan, you're going to be next. We just switched the order. So currently, the VUU bylaws, we have an Article 2, very similar to the old very similar to the UUA's bylaws. We have our own. And it has section 201, which is our mission. Love is our doctrine, service is our prayer, justice is our calling. Section 202, covenant. I won't read the whole thing, but that's what exists right now. Now, the board has proposed, and this is for the congregation to decide. We're not trying to say that this is what we should do, but it's the congregation's decision to make at our January meeting. Can Ryan, you do the next slide? These are proposed changes that we will vote on in January. The addition of anything in orange was suggested by our VUU special committee. I'll just read it. We, the Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation, wish to retain and honor the language of the 7 principles and 6 sources as adopted by the UUA in 1985. As we have come to love and to live by these words, we wish to preserve them as both a significant part of our history and our current covenant as a community. Now, Ryan, can you do the next slide? Okay, so this is what the UUA previously had before the recent change to Article 2, except with the changes that are now crossed out and small orange additions, like we removed congregation and association and added valley and congregation, as you can see. But otherwise, it's what the UUA had. Next slide. And then the 6 sources, with one small change, which is adding the letter A and near the bottom as a free congregation and removing the S. But otherwise, it's exactly the way the UUA previously had it. And that is what we'll vote on in January. Any questions? That's where we're at, is we're going to vote on whether or not we would like to add that. And it will take a 2/3 majority, so it would need to be an overwhelming majority to make this change to our bylaws. Nancy, you have a microphone? Okay, if there's any questions, we can answer it. But, all right, we can move on to the mortgage update if not. Okay. Deanne, I'll turn the time over to you to give us a brief update because there were some questions about our mortgage.
So I'm, first of all, embarrassed to say that I did not talk with the bank this week, and so we're still going to be doing that. But here's where we are. We originally borrowed $1.1 million. Right now, we owe $501,000, and that's down $50,000 from 2 years ago when we changed the mortgage rate. So 2 years ago, we entered into a recast mortgage at 4.25%. It brought our payments way down from $63,000 a year to $41,000 a year. And as of January, it will adjust. It was a fixed rate for 3 years. It's an adjustable rate annually thereafter, and it will adjust to the maximum adjustment, which is 3% higher. And that'll make our mortgage payment $51,000. We're on a 20-year payment schedule, which means we have 17 years left at the current rate. Now, there has been some discussion about whether we should refinance in any way. The markets are not looking good for any kind of refinance right now because the rates are ridiculous. We will be paying, as I said, 7.25% versus our original rate, which was 6.5%. And that was back in 2009. There has been some talk among members about paying off the mortgage with special funds. There is no actual proposal on the table for that. And so I don't know if that discussion will continue. We should not have to have a resolution from the congregation in January. If we do nothing, the rate will go up. Our payments will go up a little bit. And that's just the terms of the mortgage. So we won't have to have any specific approval for that. Any questions? Rita.
Do our investments pay more than that increase in our mortgage
So do our investments pay more than the interest on the loan? So I would say, and Carl's sitting here, he can nod or shake his head, that I'm sure our investments pay more than the 4.25% we're paying today. And I'm not sure about the 7.25%. Carl?
So it's more than just.
Do we have a mic?
What I'm getting at is, would it make sense to pay off the mortgage if we're not earning more otherwise?
Right. So one of the things that I've talked to Deanne about working with her on is to give everybody some numbers to look at, because it's not, that's one layer of it, what you mentioned. Another layer of it is that from whatever the balance is of those investments, we are taking a certain percentage out every year to make available for grants. And those grants fund projects here, you know, the coverings. Instead of cardboard, now we have wood, which, you know, some people are picky about, you know. Our new welcome table, and we've used it in the past for emergency things that happen on campus. So any amount we take out of that principal balance is going to affect those grants also, which is in one way a safety net we have in place to be able to pay for those things that are kind of one-off items that are off budget. So it's not just the interest rate that we need to pay attention to, but it's also the impacts on other things. And I'm going to work and when the time comes to decide, have that data so everybody can take a look at it, if that makes sense. That is correct. It is a balance between those two, and it's also really taking the time to have an understanding about the total impact. And so, for instance, if the grant isn't available, that $40,000 isn't going to be replaced to special funds. It just comes out of the operating budget. So that those grants will be permanently decreased until we build up again. So there's a lot of nuances to this, and I think we owe it to ourselves to be able to take the time to really understand those before, because the congregation will need to vote in order to free up those dollars.
So I want to add to that, and then we'll go to David, that this would mean taking $500,000 of about a $900,000 special fund. So it's more than half of that. I don't think we should panic about January's interest rate. It's going up. It could go up again a year from then. So in my mind, we have a little more than a year to really have a thorough discussion and look at this carefully. So my opinion is we shouldn't worry about doing anything in January.
Well, there is another option. We could take $70,000 or $100,000 out of special funds, reduce what we owe, and to keep our mortgage payment about the same. And this way, we're working on reducing our debt. And the nice thing about having no debt is the bank is not part of your life, right? They're not a partner in your decision-making process. So there is intermediate options. It's not just all or nothing.
And I just want to point out that we have about a $3 million campus that is financed with that $500,000. So we're in a really good position debt-wise.
Deanne, one quick question. Is there any kind of prepayment penalties or anything like that that we have to worry ever about? Or anything?
None.
Okay. Our next item is congregational survey. So I'll pass it over to Nancy Egley. Absolutely. Thank you. Nancy Egley and Katie Hirschwicker.
Hi, everybody. So we are so excited. This has been, Nancy and I and other committee members have been working on this diligently through this fall and through the summer. And so we're excited to bring back a survey, which is what was done years ago, yeah? And we decided to bring it back. And so, well, next slide. So, your voice matters. We want to hear from the congregation. We are, led by our congregants. And so at our last annual meeting, and from other voices, that the board really wanted to make sure that we heard you, that we're going to bring this back. And so a task force was created, and like I mentioned, throughout the fall and the summer, we did research. We looked back at the history of our congregation, how we did it, what were the questions. We looked at what other congregations were doing. And in September, the board approved that the task force become a permanent committee. And then we also approved the survey and an assessment plan. And so our goal is to make sure that everybody's input is heard, that's considered, that we're acted upon, and that we're actually, congregate-led, and to make sure that we get all that good information from you guys that we can compare to year and see how we're growing.
So,
Next slide.
I want to assure everybody that even though I spend the summers in Iowa, I don't normally do nothing. That sentence came out badly, but you know what I mean. Our assessment committee is comprised of Katie Hirschwicker and myself as co-chairs, Paul Snyder, Tom Briggs, David Shea, and Mary Erickson in no particular order. That was just the easiest read. And the email address for the committee is assessment@vuu.org.
Next slide. So there's two parts that we came up with. The first one is survey. So we will be doing the survey like was previously done. And the survey is broken up into 3 sections. The first one is about you. So this is personal information, which will be optional. If you provide your name and contact information, which we hope you do, we'll be able to follow up if there's any specific concerns. However, it is optional. The next section is called More About You. This is where we get to understand more about our congregation through demographics. Again, these are also optional, but it helps us ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of our participants and make sure that we get that we can plan according to the demographics of our congregation: age, gender, participation, attendance, pledging history, membership status, all that kind of good stuff. And then the last part is about your experience. These are going to be open-ended questions, and where we get to hear your thoughts, your feelings about how we're currently doing. And your honest feedback is critical. Because it helps us understand how we are doing. Like I said, it helps us give us more insight. And we would like everybody to participate in this survey, right? So not only people who are currently sitting in this room, but new members, old members, and people who are, who may not be here in person anymore, or who are just even come just a couple of times. So please spread the word. You'll be getting an email on Monday from the board with the link. And you'll also, if you don't want to, you can do the QR code. We'll talk about it at the end. Sorry, I got ahead of myself.
Yeah, well, that's okay. And it's just important to know that we really do want everybody's input. And I'm going to talk for a minute now about, separate from the survey, the assessment plan that's been developed. And please know that this is the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah.
And Tom Briggs will understand why I said that if nobody else does. We broke the areas of the programs in the congregation down so we don't have to do everything at once, because the more you try to do everything at once, the less real information that's usable you end up with. So we broke the areas down, and they are on this slide: leadership, faith formation, worship, pastoral care, social justice, administration, stewardship, membership, and mission and vision. And those are the main areas of each of the 9. There are sub areas, so nobody got left out. And there will be, once we get started, and some things have to go through policy committee and back to the board, but once we get started, they're going to be, in addition to the survey that we're going to talk about a little bit more, there are going to be 3 assessments a year, and which ones are when is up to the committee and the people that are going to be involved in doing the assessing. And so that's what's happening with the assessment team. And at some point when the policy committee is done and the board has approved the assessment policy, the entire explanation of how the program works is going to be a part of the assessment policy, and anybody can read it, and anybody who's involved in assisting their group with an assessment will have a hard copy so that they may understand what we're asking them to do, and so that when we get done, we have assessments that contain similar information. Next slide. And this again is the Reader's Digest version, and I'll let
Yeah, those are just the kind of key components. We have a 20-point plan. So you can go to the next slide.
Well, one thing. Hold on.
Back.
Sorry, Ryan. I must have skipped it in my paper. The assessment process is a choice. There are 4 different kinds of assessment, and when an assessment is done by a group, they will choose which kind or perhaps kinds they want to be involved with. And the key components are leadership and participation, goals and methods, outcomes and analysis, and action planning. And now you could go to the next slide, and I'll let everybody read those if you can see them. Each assessment will involve a 20-point plan, everything from deciding what you're doing with in concert with the assessment committee, down to making sure that there's a report in the happenings and at a meeting like this of some form that involves what the group doing the assessment has determined to be 1 to 3 action steps that they decided because of their work that group wants to take on. So I'm going to leave this up for just a minute so everybody can read. And there are 3 slides of this. And like I said, if anybody wants to read the details, the assessment policy will be up as soon as we can complete it in policy committee and at the board. This is a board committee.
Next slide. Go to the next one. These are the questions and analysis to affect the effectiveness and of our mission.
And and each, like I said, I think, each assessment will be driven by the details in these 20 questions. And now I'm going to let Katie go back to talking about what's going to happen with the survey. And you will have noticed if you were here early that the survey slide with the QR code was up at the beginning of the service. And now I'm going to be quiet and let Katie finish.
You can then go to the next slide. So then, which is the last point, which is about taking what we learned, creating a 1 to 3 year action plan, and then communicating it to the congregation. So the one of the last slide, or second to last slide,
There we go.
is our reporting. So we want to make sure that the information that we gathered is communicated to y'all. So the survey data, the survey that is currently up and running right now, that's that went out in the happenings on October 31st, I believe. We will present that to the board at the board meeting in December, and then we will present it at the Congregational meeting as well. It's in January. And then we're also going to put a link in the happenings as well as on the website so you can reference back to it. And then the assessment findings, once we haven't started the assessment process, that's still got to go through some policy committees. But once we start that, then once we do each area, then we'll present it to the board, and then we'll present it to the congregation in the website and the happenings. All right, next slide. So this is our survey. So like I mentioned before, we want everybody to participate in this survey. So we're going to try to reach out to people that we haven't seen in a while. I'm going to flag you down. As most of you know, I'm not shy. I'm extremely direct. I will chase you down in the parking lot to fill it out, okay? And we also recognize that people are not everybody's tech savvy. So I also have paper. And you just need to bring it back to somebody on the committee or leave it at the office, and then we'll input it. So I have, Rita already did, a paper one today, so, and I've got copies out there, so we can get those copies for you as well. We just want to make sure that we access everybody, and but also throughout this time, there will be a link on the, that keeps coming up. So if you lose the paper or you lose, you forget the link, it'll be in the happenings every week, and it will also be in a congregational email that I mentioned that'll go out on Monday from the board, and then I'm going to have the tables set up before and after service until the 16th.
And I'm going to let Katie do some of those logistics because, in all honesty, if I had to carry things in my hands, it might be lethal. So please don't be offended if I say, will you please talk to Katie about that particular piece?
Yeah. Questions?
I've seen the survey in an email, and I am very curious about two things. One, how is it going, because you do have on the demographics someone who has left the congregation. How are you contacting them to fill it out?
Yeah.
I mean, I have several people I know. I thought I might forward the survey to them, but I'm curious as to how you are handling that. And the second, and in some ways I think more important question is, why, I looked at the survey and especially the open-ended questions. There's a lot of demographic stuff. You could go through it fairly quickly. You still have to read like pages. Yeah. And you say at the very beginning, this should take you 10 to 15 minutes. And I don't see how anyone could seriously use that survey and do it in 10 to 15 minutes.
That's good feedback. Thank you for that. I'm going to change that.
And I will respond as well. If you would have received the link for the survey if you receive happenings. And that's not something that we're going to preclude, but there are answers in the demographic data, one of which is I no longer attend or something very similar to that, and that's the best we can do. And if somebody gives their name and their information, we will certainly know that they have responded. One thing that isn't necessarily directly related to this, but may impact it to some extent, is that, like I said, if you get the happenings and you make a response, we're not going to ignore it. That's the first point and the most important point. The second point is the board is, as a separate matter, working on the annual membership update circumstance, and that's not completed yet, but it is in process, so there will be some things that happen in regard to that at least make the survey committee, when we tabulate the data, take certain things into consideration, but that doesn't preclude who can answer the survey. If they get the congregational email, and in December, on the first week of December, there'll be a congregational text with the link in it, and each week in happenings, there'll be a link. Honestly, that's the best we can do.
Yeah. And then also, Mary, I think it's fantastic. Please forward it to people, right? Because if you're like me, we are so inundated by emails right now. Companies are now doing text. Now we get inundated by text. So I always tell people, if you really want to get a hold of me, you got to call me. I'm old school now, even then, right? So please pass it on to people, and that you know that may or may not see it, or who have been here previously, that we don't see much anymore, who might miss it. So I think that's the biggest piece. But we are going through the roles that we have and trying to make sure that we include those people. And thank you for the feedback about the time.
Yeah, we should change that.
Yeah,
another person said the same thing.
Yeah. It's Bill up here.
Does the technology exist for me to go back after I've finished and submitted the survey, to go back and maybe change some of my?
Yes, there's an option where you can go back and change it, and where you can go back and it says it will if you're using the same, I believe if you're using the same
email address and
email
computer.
address or the same what? Device, the same device, that it will recognize that it's you, and there'll be, when you click on the link, it'll say edit your response. Yeah. And so, but if yeah.
And please, we discovered on, I think it was Friday, that Google has made a change in their survey process, and if you go into edit, there's a little black thing at the bottom that says the equivalent of, don't share this URL unless you want somebody else to edit your survey. And there is a unique URL for each survey. Maybe it's only one letter different, but there's a unique URL for each survey. So as long as you don't do the clicking that's necessary to find your exact URL, which when I did mine was like 5 lines long, nobody can enter to edit your survey besides you. So we need to make. Yeah,
that's right.
Right. We need to make people aware that pizza's
pizza coming. All right.
Pizza's coming. Any other questions? Any other comments, Mark? Oh, somebody. I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Angela, yeah.
I know I'm the queen of off-topic questions. I'm still looking on my voter ballot, and next to the presidential candidates, in smaller print, there's like 12 names. Does anybody know what what those names mean? Are those like the electoral college people, or what? I was hoping somebody who had already voted would know and educate me.
I can answer that. Yeah. I'm a poll observer, and there are, at every poll in the county, at every poll in the county, there is a spectacularly smart machine. If you go in to vote in person, it will allow you to vote by just pressing a button, and you could change it if you wanted. It works for blind people, it works for deaf people, it works for people who have tremors, it works for people, because a lot of people can't actually fill in that small round, that they got Parkinson's, or they have various issues. And I've seen it being used, and it's at every single in-person polling place. And that's what you need to do. I hope you can do it, because the voting is really important. But it's set up. The county, Maricopa County has the most extraordinary voting machines of any county in the United States.
Angela was, I think the question was, what are those names beside the presidential votes where you're doing? What do those small names mean? Those are the electors who actually will cast their vote. That was the question, right? And so when you vote, if you vote for whichever candidate for president, you're actually voting for those electors.
Thank you. Well, no, it's great. Yeah, so I just have an announcement. Speaking of elections and free-floating anxiety and, all the things that are going on. So the pastoral care folks will be in the sanctuary here on Wednesday. So after we've had a little bit of Tuesday. So Wednesday from 3 to 6 p.m., we will be here if people want to come and just talk, say a prayer, light a candle, walk the labyrinth, and we'll just be together if you need a little bit of breathing space and decompression. Yes, Joyce. Yes, and we have some papers that I made copies of, but because we have so many things going on here and too many competing things at one time, we weren't able to talk about it with people, but we have actually a worksheet that says, what's your biggest fear, and, anyway, it'll take you through a bunch of things, and we made 12 copies. I know there's more than that here, but we can put it online, too. But it's just a worksheet to kind of write out how you're feeling, and maybe that's helpful for some people too. So I just wanted you to know, Wednesday afternoon, 3 to 6, come by. There'll be some of us here to just kind of, be together. So thank you.
And then lastly, really quickly on the survey, please let us know. Mary, thank you so much for sharing about how long it takes. I'm a queen of underestimating how long things take. And then Deanne just showed me another aspect. So we are new at this, and so please send any questions or anything like that to assessment@VUU. Okay.
I just want to make a pitch for the wonderful Colombian food that is for sale on that back table. If you don't want to wait for the pizza and you want healthier food, go there.
Okay, and last slide. So I do want to thank the Leadership Development Committee for getting us together for the Interest Fair. Remember, if you don't have a job, you could. There's lots to do, and the Leadership Development Committee is the best place to start, not only for elected offices, although that's usually what we hear their name associated with, but all sorts of committees have lots of need, and it would be great if everybody took on at least one job, because we can't all be those people that have 6 or 7 or 8 jobs. You know who you are. Thank you for all of you who wear multiple hats. With that, you have a question or a comment? Yes, that was the last one. I guess we have to wait for the pizza anyway, so yes, let's talk about it.
I just wondered if there was anybody here who could address maybe any information or a timetable or do anything to let us know what's happening with the music program that has been on hiatus since middle of May, and that's a long time to go without information for the choir. I realize there's been small ensembles, etc. But I was just, in the spirit of sharing information, what can you tell us about the status of that?
I know there is a steering committee. I am on it. And I have Reverend Sarah sent a message this week with topics and things that could be need to be addressed, or it's broken down into parts. First one is the doodle, so that we can meet, and we put. I think we're establishing meetings up and through December, but we haven't had those meetings yet. There's been. We did have one Zoom meeting.
It looks like the next one's going to be November 13th.
Yeah, and there are a number of. I thought she did a great job of breaking out some of the concerns and issues that need to get resolved in order to move ahead. That's all I know.
The Music Steering Committee's charge is to do what?
Well, all sorts of, like, the people have to figure out what they're going to do up here every Sunday. It's bigger than just the choir.
I realize that. Is there any attempt to put out regular postings about what you've been discussing and where you are?
I think we're not far enough along because I think we only had one meeting. But I'm on that wagon with you. I think that getting information out as soon as possible, especially a timeline, would be really wonderful. So just as one member of it, I would like to see that happen, but not prematurely, not before people have, discussed and whatever. So, yeah.
And Mary volunteered to help with communication to the congregation. And that volunteering just happened in the last couple of days. So I hate to say it in this way, but it's coming and it's intentional. And all of the people on the steering committee have different jobs that they are responsible to, maybe in pairs, maybe singly, maybe in the large group. Some of that hasn't been determined yet. I don't know everyone, so I think there's going to be communication this coming week, and I don't want to say wrongly because I don't know everyone, but I know that I am, and I know that Mary is.
Lisa Bonin, thank you, Benign, Terry McGovern-Nitzel, Noel Hyman, Lynn DeBooth, Lori Fagan, Roz Hawkins, Nancy, and me.
So I have some of these worksheets in case anybody wants it. So name who and what you cannot control, name who, name what you need to feel safe, what grounds you and helps you center. So if anybody thinks that would be helpful, you're welcome to take one of those. Thanks.
Okay, this is unscripted, so any other conversation while we wait for the pizza? Or we could continue with the interest fair and chat it up. I think that's a good use of our time. All right, interest fair and chatting it up. Thank you all for joining us. All right, have a great rest of your Sunday.